The partners' conference room fell silent as my father's words hung in the air. To Williams and Associates' new managing partner and the future of our firm, my son, Kevin. Champagne glasses clinked around me while I stood frozen, legal pad clutched in my hand, certain I'd misheard. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My younger brother, who had failed the bar exam twice before, passing, who still brought me his motions to review, who had joined the firm barely 3 years ago compared to my 8. That Kevin was now my boss? My father's eyes skipped over me as partners offered congratulations, his message clear as any legal brief. A Williams man would lead the Williams firm, regardless of merit. I'd been foolish to think talent and dedication mattered more than gender in my father's eyes. But as the accounting notification flashed on my phone, showing nearly $1 million quietly transferred from our firm's accounts to a mysterious LLC, I realized this betrayal went far deeper than passed-over promotion. This was about ethics, client funds, and everything a law firm should stand for. My father had taught me that a lawyer's reputation was their most valuable asset. Now I had to decide what to do with the devastating truth. The man who'd taught me about legal ethics was breaking them all. I arrived at Williams and Associates at 5:30 that morning, a full 2 hours before anyone else would be in the office. The downtown Phoenix law firm had been my home for 8 years, ever since I'd passed the bar and declined offers from prestigious firms in New York and Chicago to join the family business. My grandfather had founded Williams Legal Services in 1962, a one-man operation defending small businesses. My father had transformed it into Williams and Associates, a respected mid-sized firm handling everything from complex corporate litigation to high-profile personal injury cases. And I, Sarah Williams, had spent my entire life preparing to one day lead it into the future. The early morning silence of the office felt different today, heavier, laden with betrayal. I unlocked my office door and settled behind my desk, surrounded by diplomas and case victories that suddenly felt hollow. Top of my class at Stanford Law, federal clerkship with Judge Hernandez, the Beaumont class action that had saved the firm during the recession and brought in $8 million in fees. None of it had mattered yesterday when my father had announced Kevin as managing partner. I pulled up the accounting notification that had appeared on my phone during the announcement. A transfer of $400,000 from our operating account to Williams, Legacy Holdings LLC, an entity I'd never heard of despite being a named partner in the firm. 2 more notifications appeared when I searched back through records, $250,000 and $175,000 transfers to the same LLC over the past month. My legal training kicked in, pushing personal feelings aside to examine facts. Almost $1 million, quietly moved without partner approval. I checked the signatory, my father's electronic signature on all 3 transfers. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Maya Patel, our IT director, peered around my door. "Sarah, you wanted the server logs from last month?" "Yes, come in." I'd texted Maya last night, asking for access to review electronic records. "I need to trace some accounting irregularities." Maya set her laptop on my desk, her expression concerned. "I heard about yesterday's announcement. Everyone's shocked. We all assumed you'd be taking over when your father retired." Apparently my father had other plans. I kept my voice neutral despite the knot in my throat. "I need to check something. Else, while you're here, can you pull up the access records for our client trust accounts?" Maya's fingers flew across her keyboard. "Time period?" "Last 6 months." She turned the screen toward me. "There's been unusual activity. Multiple after-hours access points from your father's credentials. Normally, he only reviews trust accounts during monthly reconciliations." I scanned the logs, stomach sinking as I spotted a familiar pattern. Large settlements coming in, followed by unscheduled trust account access, followed by transfers out that didn't match expected disbursement schedules. Maya, I need you to prepare a complete backup of all financial records and communications, segregated from our main server, accessible only with dual authentication from you and me. Her eyes widened slightly, but she nodded. As the firm's head of cybersecurity, she understood the implications of my request. You think someone's compromised our systems? I think I need to verify our financial integrity. I chose my words carefully, unwilling to accuse my father outright without conclusive evidence. Client trust accounts are sacred in our profession. Any irregularity needs thorough investigation. I'll have the secure backup ready by noon. Maya hesitated. Should I tell Mr. Williams? Standard protocol. No. My response came too quickly. This is a confidential internal audit that I'm conducting as named partner. I'll inform the appropriate parties when I have findings to report. After Maya left, I unlocked my bottom desk drawer and removed a legal pad. As much as I trusted digital records, some things needed to be documented on paper. I began a timeline of everything I knew. Kevin's surprise appointment, the unauthorized transfers, the trust account irregularities. The picture forming was one. No daughter wanted to see, no attorney could ignore. My intercom buzzed. Ms. Williams, you have a visitor. Mr. Chen is here. Walter Chen. My mentor since I'd joined the firm, head of our litigation department, and my father's oldest friend. At 68, Walter had been planning a gradual retirement, transitioning his major cases to me over the past year. Yesterday, he'd caught my eye during the announcement, his slight headshake warning me to stay quiet. Walter entered my office, closing the door firmly behind him. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. The contrast between his impeccable gray suit and his evident exhaustion was jarring. You've been looking at the financial records, he said without preamble. I kept my expression neutral. What makes you say that? Because I've been watching them for months. Walter lowered himself into the chair across from my desk, wincing slightly. His recent hip surgery, delayed twice at my father's insistence that the Halverson case took priority, still caused him pain. The LLC transfers are just the beginning, Sarah. The knot in my stomach tightened. Tell me. Walter sighed heavily. Your father is dissolving the current partnership structure. He's creating a new entity where he and Kevin will control 70% interest. He can't do that. Our partnership agreement has a dissolution clause that can be triggered by the founding partner, your father, with cause. What cause? Walter's expression was grim. He's building a case that several partners, including me, are no longer capable of meeting our obligations due to age or health concerns. I shook my head in disbelief. That's ridiculous. You just won the Sullivan trial last month. With your research and preparation, Walter acknowledged. Richard is counting on the fact that most senior partners will take retirement packages rather than fight. My mind raced. And the transferred funds? Setting up the new entity, I believe, creating operating capital that the old firm won't be able to reclaim. I processed this information, legal strategies already forming. The partnership agreement has protective covenants. This can't be legal. Walter smiled slightly. I taught you well. He reached into his jacket pocket and removed a small flash drive. This contains documentation I've been gathering. Financial records, emails, meeting notes that weren't circulated to all partners. Your father has been planning this for at least a year. A year? The betrayal cut deeper. Last year, I'd declined an offer to head litigation at Morris & Foster, a prestigious competitor, because my father had hinted I was being groomed for leadership. Walter's expression softened. There's more, Sarah. The Westfield settlement funds. My blood ran cold. Westfield was my case, a tragic wrongful death. Suit involving a young mother killed by faulty manufacturing equipment. We'd settled for $8.4 million. with the funds deposited into our client trust account 2 weeks ago, awaiting final distribution to the family and their minor children. The settlement check was deposited, Walter continued, but $2.1 million appears to have been temporarily diverted to an investment account before being returned 3 days later. That's not just unethical, that's criminal, I whispered. Trust accounts were inviolable. Client funds that could never be commingled with firm money or borrowed, even temporarily. Walter nodded gravely. Which is why I need your help. I've been building a case, but as your father's oldest friend, I have limited access without raising suspicion. You, as his daughter and a named partner, can access records I can't. You want me to investigate my own father? My own firm? I want you to protect your clients, your career, and the firm your grandfather built with integrity. Your father has lost his way, Sarah. The power, the prestige, it's corrupted him. I thought of the clients who trusted us with their most significant legal matters, the staff whose livelihoods depended on the firm, the legacy that was being tarnished. What about Kevin? Is he involved? I don't believe so. Kevin may be entitled and underqualified, but I don't think he's dishonest. Just a convenient figurehead who won't ask difficult questions. I turned the flash drive over in my fingers, feeling the weight of the decision before me. How much time do we have? The new structure is scheduled to be finalized in 3 weeks, after your father's 70th birthday gala. The irony wasn't lost on me. The celebration I'd been planning for months would now serve as the backdrop for my father's betrayal of everything he'd taught me about legal ethics. I'll need access to the server archives, I said, my mind already building an investigation strategy, and the complete trust account records for the past year. Walter's eyes held a mixture of sadness and pride. This won't be easy, Sarah. He's your father. He stopped being just my father the moment he compromised our client's interests, I replied. Now he's a lawyer who's violated his oath, and that I cannot ignore. Walter nodded, understanding the weight of my decision. Then, we begin. The next few hours passed in a blur of focused investigation. I reviewed the documents Walter had compiled, tracing money movements through increasingly complex pathways. By lunchtime, a disturbing pattern had emerged. Client settlement funds being temporarily borrowed from trust accounts, used for firm expenses or investments, then replaced before disbursement deadlines, sometimes using funds from newer settlements in a dangerous shell game. My secretary knocked softly. Ms. Williams, your mother is on line 1. She says it's about the birthday gala planning. I took a deep breath before picking up. Hi, Mom. Sarah, darling, where have you been? I've called you 3 times this morning. Elizabeth Williams' voice carried the crisp authority that had made her one of Phoenix's most formidable charity organizers and social connectors. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The florist needs final approval on the arrangements, and the caterer wants to confirm the champagne selection. I've been in meetings, I said vaguely. Can we discuss this tonight? Tonight is the Hendersons' benefit, which you would know if you checked the family calendar. The disapproval in her voice was familiar. I need answers now, Sarah. Your father's 70th is our most important social event this year. I closed my eyes, wondering how my mother would react to knowing her husband was potentially facing disbarment or even criminal charges. Would she stand by him? Probably. Elizabeth Williams had spent 40 years crafting the image of perfect family and flawless success. Reality that contradicted this narrative simply didn't penetrate her worldview. Whatever the florist suggests is, fine, Mom, and the veuve for champagne. You sound distracted. Is this about Kevin's promotion? Because really, Sarah, you should be grateful. Managing a law firm is hardly compatible with family life, which you should be focusing on at your age. 34 is I have to go. Mom? Client emergency? I hung up before she could launch into her familiar lament about my lack of husband and children, wondering if she'd ever considered that my dedication to the firm had been the primary obstacle to that traditional path. My phone buzzed with a text message from Kevin. Lunch at Morton's? Dad wants to discuss transition plans. I stared at the message, fighting a wave of anger. Kevin, with his mediocre law school record and minimal trial experience, was now privy to high-level strategy discussions I was excluded from. The unfairness burned, but also presented an opportunity. I needed information about my father's plans, and Kevin's natural boastfulness might provide it. Meet you there at 12:30, I replied. Morton's was walking distance from our offices, a power lunch staple for Phoenix's legal and business elite. I arrived to find Kevin already seated at my father's usual corner table, looking out of place in a suit that probably cost more than his monthly salary. He'd ordered a scotch despite the early hour. "There she is," he called out too loudly as I approached. "Dad's stuck on a call with Judge Pearson, but he'll join us soon." I slid into the booth. "Celebrating your promotion?" Kevin grinned, oblivious to my tone. Still can't believe it, honestly. But Dad says the firm needs new energy, fresh ideas. "What kind of fresh ideas do you have, Kevin?" I kept my voice light, conversational. "Modernization, mainly. Dad thinks we're too bogged down in old-school processes." He leaned forward conspiratorially. "Between us, he says Walter and the other senior partners are too cautious, too focused on compliance rather than growth opportunities. Compliance with legal and ethical standards is rather important in our profession," I noted dryly. Kevin waved dismissively. "Obviously, we follow the rules, but Dad says there are creative ways to structure things that still technically comply while maximizing profit." "Creative ways like the new LLC he's forming? Williams Legacy Holdings?" Kevin's surprise was genuine. "You know about that? Dad just mentioned it to me yesterday. It's part of the restructuring plan." "What restructuring plan?" I asked, feigning ignorance. "The whole firm's getting reorganized. Dad's bringing in Harrington Global as a major client, but they want a more streamlined partnership structure. Some of the older partners are taking retirement packages. Harrington Global, a construction conglomerate with a reputation for aggressive business practices and regulatory corner-cutting. Walter had declined to represent them 3 years ago, citing concerns about their compliance history. And the new structure gives you 70% controlling interest," I probed. Kevin's brow furrowed. "What?" "No, Dad and I will have majority control, but it's like 51%, I think." "Interesting." My father was keeping Kevin in the dark about the actual numbers. Did Dad explain how the capital accounts will transfer, or the client management transitions? He said not to worry about that stuff yet. Kevin took a long sip of his scotch. "I'm supposed to focus on client relationships while he handles the financial restructuring." He paused, studying me. "You don't seem happy for me, Sarah." I chose my next words carefully. "I want what's best for the firm and our clients, Kevin. Managing partner is a huge responsibility with significant fiduciary duties and ethical obligations. Dad may be asking more of you than you realize." "You think I can't handle it," he said, defensiveness creeping into his voice. "I think Dad might be putting you in a difficult position without giving you all the information you need." I leaned forward. "Kevin, as managing partner, you're legally responsible for the firm's financial decisions, including trust account management. Have you reviewed our current client trust accounts?" He shrugged uncomfortably. "Dad says the accounting department reports directly to him during the transition. That arrangement doesn't shield you from liability if there are improprieties," I said quietly. "The Bar Association won't accept Dad handled it as a defense." Kevin's expression shifted from defensiveness to uncertainty. For the first time, I saw a crack in his entitled confidence. "What are you saying, Sarah?" I'm saying you should demand complete transparency about the firm's finances before signing anything. Review every account, every client trust balance, every transfer. That's your right and responsibility as managing partner. Before Kevin could respond, my father approached the table, his imposing figure commanding attention as always. At nearly 70, Richard Williams still maintained the commanding presence that had intimidated countless opposing counsel and charmed juries throughout his career. "Sarah, I didn't expect you to join us," he said smoothly, though his eyes betrayed irritation. "Kevin invited me," I replied with an innocent smile. "We were just discussing his new responsibilities as managing partner, including his fiduciary oversight of client trust accounts." My father's smile tightened imperceptibly. "I've explained to Kevin that we'll transition those responsibilities gradually. No need to overwhelm him with technical details immediately." "Technical details like the Westfield settlement disbursement?" I asked. "I noticed there was a delay in the funds transfer to the family." "Minor procedural issue, already resolved." My father dismissed, signaling the waiter. "The Manhattan, please, and bring my son another scotch." "Nothing for me?" I raised an eyebrow. "You seem quite alert already, Sarah." His tone carried a warning. "Kevin, I've scheduled meetings with our top 5 clients next week to introduce you as managing partner. We'll start with Barnes Development on Monday." The rest of lunch proceeded with my father dominating the conversation, outlining Kevin's introduction to key clients while systematically excluding me from the discussion. I observed the dynamic with new clarity, how skillfully my father managed Kevin with flattery and vague promises, how eagerly my brother absorbed the attention without questioning the substance. When my father excused himself to take a call, Kevin turned to me with uncharacteristic seriousness. "Do you really think I need to check the trust accounts?" "I think you need to protect yourself," I said honestly. "Dad's making you the face of major changes. Make sure you understand exactly what you're putting your name on." Kevin nodded slowly, unexpected vulnerability in his expression. "I always thought you resented me." "You're my brother, Kevin. Whatever issues we have, I don't want to see your career destroyed before it really begins." My father returned before Kevin could respond, ending our brief moment of connection with deliberate finality. "Sarah, I need you to handle the Johnson deposition tomorrow. Kevin will be with me meeting Harrington's general counsel." "Of course," I replied, recognizing the dismissal for what it was, my relegation to routine work while Kevin was groomed for leadership. I should get back to the office to prepare. As I walked back to the firm, my phone buzzed with a message from Maya. "Secure backup complete. Found something concerning in the email archives you should see." The investigation was gaining momentum. Whatever my father was planning, whatever ethical lines he had crossed, I was now committed to exposing the truth. Not just for my own career, but for the firm my grandfather had built on principles of integrity, for the clients who trusted us with their most important matters, and yes, even for Kevin, who was being set up as either a willing accomplice or an unwitting scapegoat. The afternoon sun beat down on Phoenix's downtown legal district as I quickened my pace. 3 weeks until my father's birthday gala. 3 weeks to build a case that would either save Williams and Associates or tear my family apart. The weight of that responsibility settled on my shoulders with each step back toward the firm that bore my name, but was no longer truly mine. Back at the office, I found Maya waiting in my office, laptop open on my conference table. She closed the door behind me without being asked, her expression grave. "I found a pattern of deleted emails," she said without preamble. "Your father has been corresponding with someone named James Harrington using a private Gmail account instead of his firm email, but he occasionally forwarded documents from his work account to the Gmail." "Harrington as in Harrington Global?" I asked, sitting down beside her. "The same. It appears they've been discussing some kind of merger or acquisition for months. The language is deliberately vague, but there are references to consolidating assets and cleaning up legacy obligations before finalizing the deal. I leaned in to review the emails she'd recovered. Does Kevin appear in these communications? Only as a subject, never as a recipient. There's one from 3 months ago where your father writes, Kevin will be positioned as the face of the transition. His appointment will deflect attention from the financial restructuring. The confirmation of my suspicions brought no satisfaction. Have you found any direct references to client funds? Maya hesitated. Not explicitly, but there's a spreadsheet attached to one email titled Bridge Capital Requirements. It shows temporary allocations of funds with repayment schedules. The amounts and dates correlate with several major settlement deposits and disbursements. My father was using client settlement money to temporarily fund firm operations, I said, the reality sinking in. Borrowing from trust accounts with the intention of replacing the funds before anyone noticed. That's what it looks like, Maya confirmed quietly. The pattern suggests it started during the recession when the firm was struggling. Small amounts at first, then increasing. The recession, 7 years ago, when several major corporate clients had suspended litigation activities and slashed legal budgets. The firm had weathered the storm better than most, maintaining staff and even expanding while competitors downsized. I'd attributed our resilience to my father's leadership and the Beaumont class action I'd brought in. Now I wondered how much of our stability had been built on ethical violations. Do you need me to continue the investigation? Maya asked. I nodded. Focus on trust account reconciliations for the past 5 years. Compare disbursement schedules with actual payment dates. And Maya, complete confidentiality. I understand. She gathered her materials. For what it's worth, I started here as an intern during the recession. Your father kept me on when other firms were laying off staff. I've always respected him. So have I said quietly. That's what makes this so difficult. After Maya left, I sent a text to Walter. Found evidence of trust account violations. Need to meet tonight. His reply came quickly. Riverside Park, 7 p.m., our usual bench. For the remainder of the afternoon, I immersed myself in Johnson deposition preparations, forcing my mind to focus on the work while processing the implications of what I'd discovered. By 6:30, I had compiled my notes and questions, setting them aside to review before tomorrow's proceedings. As I prepared to leave, my father appeared in my doorway. His imposing figure filled the frame, hair still more pepper than salt despite his age, the cut of his custom suit emphasizing his athletic build. How many juries had been swayed by that authoritative presence? How many opponents intimidated? Working late? He asked casually. Johnson deposition prep, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. He nodded approvingly. Always thorough. That's why you're our best litigator. He stepped into my office, closing the door. Sarah, about yesterday's announcement. Congratulations are in order, I interrupted, not trusting myself to discuss Kevin's promotion without revealing what I now knew. I'm sure Kevin will grow into the role with your guidance. My father studied me, clearly searching for signs of resentment. I know you expected the position. Your work has been exemplary. But managing a firm requires certain intangibles, political relationships, an understanding of when rules can be flexibly interpreted. The irony of his statement, that I wasn't corrupt enough for leadership, might have been amusing under different circumstances. I understand, I said simply. He seemed surprised by my acceptance. Good. I've always valued your dedication to precision. That's why I want you to focus on case management while Kevin and I handle the administrative transition. Your talents are wasted on paperwork and partnership politics. Translation: stay in your lane. Don't ask questions about what's happening behind the scenes. Of course, I agreed, gathering my belongings. If there's nothing else, I should prepare. For tomorrow. He stepped aside to let me pass, but his voice stopped me at the threshold. One more thing, Sarah. I've been reviewing case assignments. The Harrison matter. I'm transferring primary responsibility to Jeffries. I turned back, slowly. Harrison was a major commercial litigation case I'd been building for 18 months. A case with significant settlement potential in the next few months. Any particular reason? I kept my voice steady. Jeffries has more experience with the regulatory aspects, my father replied smoothly. And with your other caseload, I thought you'd appreciate having one less matter to manage. The true reason was clear. Harrison would likely settle before my father's restructuring was complete. He was moving the fee potential to an attorney he controlled, away from me. Whatever you think is best for the client, I said, the professional. Response automatic despite my inner turmoil. My father nodded, seemingly satisfied with my compliance. That's my girl. Always putting the client first. The words felt like a mockery of everything I believed about legal ethics. Everything he had once taught me about integrity and practice. As I walked to my car, the weight of deception, both his and now mine, settled heavily on my shoulders. The father I had idolized throughout my legal education, the attorney whose ethical standards I had strived to uphold, was systematically undermining everything our firm supposedly stood for. The evening air was cooling as I reached Riverside Park, a small green space alongside the canal where Walter and I often discussed case strategy away from office ears. I found him on our usual bench, feeding crumbs to persistent ducks despite the posted signs against it. Small acts of rebellion keep us young, he said by way of greeting, nodding toward his illicit duck feeding. Though I'm guilty of worse these days, investigating my oldest friend and managing partner. I sat beside him, watching the ducks squabble over the last crumbs. It's not just trust account violations, Walter. He's been planning some kind of merger with Harrington Global, positioning Kevin as managing partner to deflect attention from financial restructuring. Walter nodded grimly. That confirms my suspicions. Harrington has wanted a controlling interest in a prestigious firm for years, gives them in-house counsel capabilities with an established reputation. But why all the secrecy? Why not just propose the merger openly? Because Richard knows I would fight it, and I have enough influence with other partners to potentially block it. Walter sighed heavily. Harrington's business practices are questionable at best. 3 federal investigations in the past decade, always settled without admission of wrongdoing. Your grandfather would never have represented them. I thought of my grandfather, whose portrait still hung in our firm's lobby. John Williams had started with nothing, building a practice based on unwavering ethics and genuine concern for clients. Would he recognize what his son had created? What his granddaughter was now uncovering? We need to decide our next steps, Walter said, interrupting my thoughts. The evidence is mounting, but still fragmented. Without a complete picture, Richard could explain away individual irregularities. I nodded in agreement. We need internal communications about the Harrington merger, and complete trust account records showing the pattern of misappropriation. The challenge is building our case without tipping him off that we're investigating, Walter cautioned. Richard is nothing if not thorough. If he suspects, he'll accelerate his timeline and destroy evidence. I thought for a moment. The birthday gala is our deadline. He won't want any disruption before his public celebration. We have 3 weeks to document everything and determine our approach. And then? Walter asked softly. The question hung between us as dusk settled over. The park. What would justice look like in this situation? A negotiated resignation, public exposure, bar disciplinary proceedings, criminal charges? Every option felt simultaneously necessary and unbearable. One step at a time, I finally replied. First, we gather irrefutable evidence. Then we determine who else is involved and to what extent. Kevin, my mother, other partners. Only then can we decide how to proceed. Walter nodded, accepting my methodical approach. You're a good attorney, Sarah, better than your father in the ways that truly matter. His words brought unexpected emotion to my throat. In the midst of professional betrayal and family deception, this simple affirmation of my worth, from the mentor who had shaped my legal career, meant more than I could express. As we parted ways, the weight of what lay ahead settled fully upon me. I was investigating my own father for ethical violations that could end his career and destroy our family. The firm that bore my name, that I had dedicated my life to building, was compromised at its very foundation. And somewhere in this tangled web of deception was my brother, either a willing participant or an unwitting pawn in our father's schemes. Tomorrow would bring the Johnson deposition, partnership meetings, and the continued facade of business as usual. But beneath the surface, everything had changed. The truth was unfolding, one damning document at a time, and nothing, not family, loyalty, not professional standing, not even my own future, could stop its inevitable revelation. The law library on our firm's 14th floor had always been my sanctuary. While most attorneys relied exclusively on digital research, I found clarity among the leather-bound volumes and the lingering scent of paper and wisdom. Tonight, the space felt different, less a refuge, more a war room as I spread documents across the large oak table, building my case against my own father. For the past 3 days, I'd maintained a careful facade of normalcy. I handled the Johnson deposition flawlessly despite my divided attention. I attended partnership meetings, nodding at appropriate moments while scanning faces for signs of complicity or suspicion. I even helped my mother finalize arrangements for my father's birthday gala, accepting her criticism of my workaholic tendencies without revealing that those tendencies were now focused on exposing her husband's ethical violations. Walter entered quietly, carrying a stack of folders and a thermos of coffee. Behind him came Elena Vasquez, the firm's most senior paralegal, who had worked with my grandfather before my father took over. Her presence surprised me. Elena has been helping me gather documentation, Walter explained, noting my expression. She's witnessed concerning patterns in trust account management over the past 5 years. Elena nodded, her usual professional reserve undercut by evident distress. Mr. Williams has been altering disbursement schedules, telling clients paperwork delays were causing payment holdups when the real issue was funds temporarily allocated elsewhere. You're certain? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Elena's meticulous attention to detail was legendary at the firm. I've kept my own records, she replied, placing a notebook on the table. Dates when settlement checks arrived versus when clients actually received funds, instructions to delay disbursements without explanation, unusual transfers between accounts. I felt a strange mixture of validation and grief. Each confirmation of my father's misconduct simultaneously strengthened our case and destroyed another piece of the man I thought I knew. Elena has worked with 5 generations of Williams attorneys, Walter said quietly. She understands what's at stake. Elena's eyes met mine. Your grandfather built this firm on his word, Ms. Williams. When he promised clients something, it happened exactly as he said. The firm's reputation was his most valued asset. She touched the worn notebook. What's happening now dishonors his legacy. Her words crystallized something I'd been feeling but couldn't articulate. This wasn't just about modern legal ethics or regulatory compliance. It was about a promise kept through generations, now broken. Thank you for your courage, I told her. I know the risk you're taking. Less risk than doing nothing, she replied simply. We worked late into the night, connecting fragments into a coherent narrative of corruption. Elena's documentation provided crucial timeline verification, confirming the pattern Maya had uncovered in the digital records. Client funds had indeed been borrowed temporarily, initially repaid quickly, but with increasingly longer gaps as the amounts grew larger. The Westfield settlement is the most concerning, Walter said, reviewing trust account statements. 2.1 million diverted for 11 days before being replaced. That's not just an ethical violation. That's criminal conversion. The bigger question is where the money went, I noted, cross-referencing dates. The time frame matches. A major renovation at Dad's Sedona property and Mom's surprise anniversary trip to Tuscany. Also, several large deposits to Williams' legacy holdings, Elena added. The LLC appears to be purchasing real estate near the proposed Harrington Global Headquarters expansion. The implication was clear. My father was using misappropriated client funds to position himself for the Harrington merger, betting that temporary diversions would go unnoticed if he replaced the money before final disbursements. We need to verify the Harrington connection, I said, gathering the scattered documents into organized piles. The merger seems to be the endgame, but we need more than speculation. Walter nodded. I have a contact at the Corporate Commission who might help trace the LLC ownership structure. I'll reach out tomorrow. As we prepared to leave, Elena hesitated. Ms. Williams, there's something else you should know. Your brother came to the accounting department yesterday asking to review trust account records. This caught me by surprise. Kevin did? On his own initiative? He said he needed to understand all aspects of the firm's operations as incoming managing partner. Elena's expression remained neutral, but I detected a hint of approval. Ms. Chang in accounting gave him access to the current statements, but not historical records. I thought of our conversation at lunch, my warning about his responsibility as managing partner. Perhaps Kevin wasn't entirely the oblivious figurehead my father intended. That's interesting, I said carefully. Let's keep monitoring that situation. After Walter and Elena left, I remained in the library, contemplating our next steps. The evidence was mounting, but still fragmented. We needed internal communications about the Harrington merger, documentation of the decision to elevate Kevin, and the complete restructuring plan my father was implementing. My phone chimed with a text from my mother. Finalized menu for your father's birthday. Need you to confirm wine selection by tomorrow. Also, wear the blue Armani for the Henderson benefit tomorrow night. Photos for the society page. The mundane message felt surreal against the backdrop of what I'd discovered. Elizabeth Williams was orchestrating social appearances while her husband diverted client funds to finance their lifestyle. Was she complicit? Or simply willfully ignorant of anything that would disrupt her carefully cultivated image? I texted back a bland confirmation, then gathered my materials into a secure file box Walter had provided, one that would remain in the library safe rather than my office where my father might discover it. The elevator descended to the parking garage, empty at this late hour except for a few cars belonging to associates working through the night. As the doors opened, I was startled to find Kevin waiting, his normally perfect appearance disheveled, tie loosened, and hair uncharacteristically rumpled. "Been looking for you," he said, stepping into the elevator before I could exit. "We need to talk." I maintained my composure despite my racing heart. "It's late, Kevin. Can it wait until tomorrow?" "No." He jabbed the button for the lobby. "Not here. Too many ears." His uncharacteristic terseness alarmed me. Had my father discovered our investigation? Was Kevin here as his messenger? We rode in silence to the lobby, then walked through the deserted space to the plaza outside. Phoenix nights remained warm even in autumn, the air still holding the day's heat as we found a bench near the decorative fountain that fronted our building. Kevin paced before me, hands jammed in his pockets. "I checked the trust accounts like you suggested." I kept my expression neutral. And there are irregularities I can't explain." He stopped pacing to face me. "Settlement funds that should be there aren't. Or they appear and disappear. Or the amounts don't match what they should be based on the settlement agreements." "What did Dad say when you asked him about it?" Kevin's laugh held no humor. "That's the thing. I haven't asked him yet. Because the more I looked, the more I found, and I'm not sure I want to hear his explanation. He ran a hand through his hair, further disarranging it. Sarah, if these discrepancies mean what I think they mean, we're in serious trouble. We? I raised an eyebrow. Yes, we. His voice rose in frustration. I'm managing partner now, remember? If there are financial improprieties happening under my watch, I'm responsible. The Bar Association won't care that Dad assured me everything was fine. I studied my brother's face, seeing genuine fear beneath his usual bravado. In his own way, Kevin was as much a victim of our father's manipulations as I was, elevated to a position he wasn't ready for, potentially to serve as a scapegoat if the scheme collapsed. What do you want from me, Kevin? He sat beside me, deflating slightly. Help me understand what's happening. You've always been better at the details, at seeing patterns. If something's wrong with our firm, I need to know. The sincerity in his voice was unfamiliar. Kevin and I had always had a complicated relationship, the favored son and the overlooked daughter, competing for our father's approval in different arenas. His natural charm and social ease contrasted with my analytical focus and work ethic. We'd never been allies. Until now, perhaps. I've noticed irregularities too, I admitted carefully. I've been looking into them. What have you found? His eyes, so like our father's, held uncharacteristic vulnerability. I weighed my options. Bringing Kevin into our investigation carried risks. He might report back to our father. He might refuse to believe the extent of the violations. Or he might panic and make impulsive decisions that compromised our evidence gathering. But excluding him meant missing an opportunity to have the firm's newly named managing partner supporting our efforts, a powerful ally if he truly wanted to address the problems. It's complicated, I said finally, and not something we should discuss here. Meet me at the Capitol Grill tomorrow for lunch. Noon. We'll talk then. Kevin nodded, visibly relieved to have a plan. I'll be there. He stood to leave, then hesitated. Sarah, why didn't you tell me you were investigating this already? Would you have believed me 3 days ago? I asked honestly. Or would you have assumed I was just jealous of your promotion? His silence was answer enough. Tomorrow, Kevin. Bring copies of anything concerning you've found. I watched him walk away, his normally confident stride subdued. Once he was gone, I called Walter despite the late hour. Kevin approached me. He's found the trust account issues on his own. Can he be trusted? Walter's concern was evident. I'm not sure, I admitted. But he's scared, and that might make him an ally. I'm meeting him tomorrow to feel out his position. Be careful, Sarah. Your father has influenced Kevin his entire life. Blood and loyalty run deep. After we hung up, I sat by the fountain for a long time, watching the play of light on water. My father had taught me that the law was about justice. That ethical practice was non-negotiable. Had he believed it then? When had principles become flexible, rules become suggestions, client funds become temporarily available resources? And more disturbing, if I hadn't been passed over for managing partner, would I have discovered these violations? Or would I have been gradually drawn into the same compromises, the same ethical flexibility, until I too could justify temporary reallocation of funds that weren't mine? Morning came too quickly after a restless night. I arrived at the office to find my calendar rearranged, 2 depositions rescheduled, a client meeting canceled. My secretary looked apologetic. Mr. Williams said you needed time to prepare for the Carson hearing next week, she explained. He reassigned some of your matters to other associates. Another move to marginalize me, limit my client contact, reduce my influence in the firm. A week ago, this would have infuriated me. Today, it was almost convenient. More time to focus on building our case. I spent the morning reviewing the evidence we'd assembled, preparing a simplified explanation for Kevin. At 11:30, I headed to the Capitol Grill, deliberately arriving early to secure a private booth away from legal district regulars, who might report our meeting to my father. Kevin arrived precisely at noon, sliding into the booth with a leather portfolio tucked under his arm. His appearance was back to its usual polished state, but tension lined his face. "I told Dad I had a lunch meeting with the Sorensen tech executives," he said without preamble. He seemed pleased, said it showed initiative. The waiter approached, but Kevin waved him off. "Just water. This isn't a social lunch." I studied my brother with new eyes. The entitled, somewhat lazy attorney who relied on charm rather than preparation was nowhere to be seen. This Kevin was focused, concerned, almost professional. "Show me what you found," I said, skipping preliminaries. Kevin opened his portfolio and removed several spreadsheets. I started with the Westfield settlement, $8.4 million total, with a 30% contingency fee to the firm. That leaves approximately $5.9 million for the clients. I nodded. Standard contingency arrangement. But when I checked the trust account statements, only $3.8 million was dispersed to the family. Kevin pointed to the highlighted figures. The difference, $2.1 million, was transferred to our operating account, then to Williams Legacy Holdings, before being returned to the trust account 11 days later. "And that struck you as problematic?" Kevin looked offended. "Of course it did. We can't use client funds like that. It's misappropriation, conversion, potentially criminal." He leaned forward. Then I found 6 other instances of similar borrowing from trust accounts over the past year. Smaller amounts, but the pattern is identical. "Did you check who authorized these transfers?" Kevin nodded grimly. "Dad's electronic signature on all of them. And yes, I verified it wasn't forged or unauthorized. The timing, the accounts involved, it could only be him." The confirmation seemed to pain him physically. Despite our differences, Kevin had idolized our father even more than I had. Richard Williams was his model of successful manhood, professional accomplishment, the standard against which he measured himself and inevitably fell short. "There's more," I said quietly. "The problem extends beyond trust account violations." I outlined what Walter, Elena, and I had discovered: the planned partnership dissolution, the secret merger discussions with Harrington Global, the systematic marginalization of partners who might object. As I spoke, Kevin's expression shifted, from disbelief to anger to a kind of resigned acceptance. "He's been planning this for months," Kevin said when I finished. "The whole managing partner announcement, it was just to position me as the face of changes I didn't even understand." "You were meant to be the distraction," I confirmed. "While attention focused on your surprise promotion, he could implement the financial restructuring without scrutiny." Kevin was silent for a long moment, absorbing the full implications. "What happens when this comes out?" "Because it will come out. Sarah, financial irregularities always do. Best case, Dad negotiates a resignation, makes restitution for any client funds still outstanding, accepts a suspension of his license. Worst case, criminal charges for the trust account violations, possible disbarment, and the firm collapses under the scandal." I kept my voice clinical, detached, though the scenarios I described felt like physical pain. "And me? I'm managing partner of a firm engaged in financial fraud." "That depends on what you do now," I said carefully. "Your knowledge is still fresh. You haven't participated in or approved any improper transfers. Your liability is limited. For now." Kevin's eyes narrowed slightly. "You've been investigating for longer than I have. Are you building a case against Dad?" I met his gaze directly. "I'm documenting what happened. What that becomes depends on several factors, including whether Dad is willing to make this right voluntarily." "You think he'll just confess and resign if confronted?" Kevin's skepticism was warranted. Our father had never admitted fault easily, even in small matters. "I think we need to give him the opportunity to correct this before it becomes a public scandal. For the firm's sake, for our clients, and yes, for our family, Kevin absorbed this, weighing options and consequences in a way I'd rarely seen him do. You said we. Does that mean you want my help? I think we need each other, Kevin. You have access as managing partner that I don't. I have legal expertise and relationships with the senior partners that you lack. And if Dad refuses to make this right? If he denies everything or tries to cover it up further? The question hung between us, heavy with implications for our family, our careers, our futures. Then we do what lawyers are supposed to do. We follow the evidence and the ethical obligations of our profession, wherever they lead. Kevin nodded slowly, a decision crystallizing in his expression. Okay, I'm in. What's our next step? We need the complete partnership restructuring documents. Dad must have drafted something formal for the Harrington merger. He keeps sensitive documents in his home office, Kevin noted. The annual family dinner is Sunday. We could look then. The suggestion surprised me. Kevin had always been careful to maintain our father's approval, never rocking the family boat. Now he was proposing we search our father's private office. You're serious about this, I observed. He made me managing partner, Sarah. Kevin's voice hardened. If these allegations are true, he put my license, my reputation, my future at risk without a second thought. So yes, I'm serious. For the first time in our adult lives, Kevin and I were truly aligned, our usual competitions suspended in the face of our father's betrayal. We spent the remainder of lunch developing a strategy. Kevin would continue reviewing financial records while appearing to focus on client relationships. I would work with Walter and Elena to document the partner marginalization pattern, and we would both attend Sunday dinner with the specific goal of accessing our father's home office. As we prepared to leave, Kevin hesitated. Does Mom know about any of this? The question had been troubling me as well. Elizabeth Williams had been married to our father for 40 years, managing their social calendar, charitable engagements, and multiple properties. Could she really be ignorant of financial improprieties that funded her lifestyle? I don't know, I admitted. But we should assume she doesn't. Mom has always separated herself from firm business. Kevin nodded, seemingly relieved. The thought of both parents being complicit would be too much to bear. Back at the office, I found Walter waiting in my office, his expression grave. We have a problem. Your father has called a special partnership meeting for tomorrow morning. Topic is streamlining operations and preparing for growth opportunities. He's accelerating the timeline, I realized. Kevin and I meeting for lunch must have triggered something. Or he simply feels confident in proceeding, Walter suggested. The birthday gala is still 2 weeks away, but perhaps the arrangements with Harrington are solidified ahead of schedule. I quickly texted Kevin, special partnership meeting tomorrow a.m. Dad moving faster than expected. His reply came seconds later. Just got the notice. What's our play? A good question. We had evidence of trust account irregularities, but nothing definitively connecting them to the partnership restructuring or Harrington merger. Challenging my father publicly without complete documentation would be professionally risky and potentially counterproductive. We observe, I texted back. Gather information. Don't tip our hand. I updated Walter on my lunch with Kevin, including his discovery of the trust account violations and willingness to help our investigation. Walter seemed cautiously optimistic. Having the named managing partner on our side significantly strengthens our position, he acknowledged. But your father has been manipulating Kevin his entire life. Be careful about placing too much trust in his newfound independence. Kevin feels betrayed, I said. Dad put him in a position to take the fall if this comes apart. That's powerful. Motivation for him to protect himself. Let's hope so, Walter replied, though his skepticism was evident. We should brief the other senior partners before tomorrow's meeting. Davis and Wong already suspect something's amiss. Martin needs to be prepared for what's coming. We spent the rest of the afternoon in careful preparation. ensuring our allies had enough information to understand the significance of whatever my father might propose without revealing the full extent of our investigation. By evening, a strategy was in place. The senior partners would request written documentation of any proposed changes, cite partnership agreement provisions requiring review periods, and generally slow the process without direct confrontation. As I prepared to leave for the day, Maya appeared at my door. "I found something in the archived emails you should see." She placed her laptop on my desk, displaying an email thread between my father and James Harrington dated 6 months earlier. "The proposed structure gives us controlling interest while maintaining the Williams name and reputation," Harrington had written. "Key is removing the old guard partners without triggering constructive termination claims. Your suggestion to elevate Kevin creates the perfect distraction while we implement the financial integration." My father's response was equally damning. "Senior partners expect Sarah to take over, based on her case record and client relationships. Naming Kevin will create the disruption we need. Transition can be completed by year-end, with partnership. Dissolution using the incapacity provisions for Chen, Davies, and Morris." The blatant manipulation burned like physical pain. I'd been right about being passed over as a distraction tactic, but seeing it confirmed in my father's own words was devastating. And the casual dismissal of Walter and other senior partners as conveniently incapacitated revealed a callousness I wouldn't have believed possible from the man who'd taught me professional ethics. "There's more," Maya said quietly, scrolling to another email. "This one's from 2 weeks ago. All preparations complete for announcement," my father had written. "Current partnership structure dissolves effectively with 70-30 control in new entity. Trust account repayments will be complete within 10 days of closing, eliminating any potential regulatory issues." This was the final confirmation. My father was fully aware that the trust account borrowing violated regulations and was rushing to cover his tracks before the merger was finalized. "We need copies of everything," I told Maya. "Full email threads, metadata, confirmation these haven't been altered." "Already done," she assured me. "I've created authenticated copies with digital signatures verifying their integrity. They'll stand up to any challenge." I thanked her, once again grateful for the network of competent professionals throughout the firm who valued integrity over loyalty to a single partner, even the founding one. After Maya left, I sat alone in my office, absorbing the implications of what we'd discovered. The evidence was now comprehensive and damning. My father had systematically violated client trust, manipulated the partnership structure, positioned my brother as an unwitting scapegoat, and derailed my career as collateral damage in his scheme. The ethical path forward was clear but agonizing. This level of misconduct required reporting to the state bar, potential criminal referral, and certainly removal of my father from any position of authority in the firm. The personal cost would be enormous. My family would be fractured, perhaps beyond repair. The firm that bore our name would be forever tainted by scandal. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd believed about my father and our professional legacy was at risk. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Don't forget the Henderson benefit tonight. Arrive by 7. Your father is receiving the Distinguished Service Award." The irony was almost unbearable. Richard Williams, about to be honored for distinguished service to the legal profession, while systematically undermining its core ethical principles. Elizabeth Williams, orchestrating the perfect social appearance while the professional foundation was crumbling. I texted back that I'd be there, knowing that maintaining normalcy was crucial until we were fully prepared to act. 3 days until the family dinner where Kevin and I planned to search our father's home office. 1 day until the special partnership meeting where my father would try to accelerate his plans. The timeline was compressing, events moving faster than anticipated. I gathered my materials, secured the evidence in our confidential file, and prepared to go home and change for the benefit. As I locked my office door, I noticed my father watching from the end of the hallway, his expression unreadable. Had he seen Maya leaving? Did he suspect our investigation? Or was he simply observing the daughter who had disappointed him by questioning the transfer of Harrison Case? We maintained eye contact for a long moment before he nodded slightly and turned away. In that brief exchange, something fundamental shifted. The mutual respect, the professional admiration, the familial bond, all were replaced by something colder and more adversarial. We were no longer father and daughter, mentor and protege. We were opposing counsel in a case with stakes higher than any courtroom battle we'd ever fought. I straightened my shoulders and walked toward the elevator, preparing myself for the evening's charade. The Hendersons' benefit would be filled with judges, attorneys, and community leaders, all there to honor Richard Williams for his contributions to the profession he was privately undermining. I would smile, make small talk, applaud my father's acceptance speech, and appear every inch the proud daughter. And all the while, I would be calculating our next moves in the case against him, weighing evidence and strategy as methodically, as he'd taught me to do throughout my legal education. The skills he'd instilled were now being turned against him, perhaps the most fitting consequence of all for a man who had placed expediency above the principles he claimed to uphold. The elevator doors closed, carrying me down to the parking garage and toward a confrontation that would redefine our family, our firm, and my own understanding of justice. The law library that had been my sanctuary was now a war room. My mentor was now my co-counsel against my own father. My brother was now an unexpected ally rather than a rival. Nothing was as it had been a week ago, and nothing would ever be the same again. The Henderson benefit unfolded like a scene from a play where I alone possessed the real script. The Phoenician Resort's grand ballroom glittered with the city's elite, judges in formal attire instead of robes, attorneys who typically battled in court now exchanging pleasantries over champagne, civic leaders and wealthy donors gathered to honor excellence in the legal profession. My father worked the room masterfully, his confident smile never wavering as he accepted congratulations for both his award and Kevin's recent promotion. I maintained my assigned role, smiling at appropriate moments, engaging in meaningless small talk about caseloads and court calendars while my mind cataloged evidence of trust account violations. When Judge Ramirez asked about the Harrison case, I smoothly explained the strategic reassignment without revealing that my father had stripped me of the matter to control its potential settlement funds. When the managing partner of Morris and Foster mentioned their previous interest in recruiting me, I deflected with practiced grace, never hinting that accepting their offer might have spared me the current moral crisis. "There's my girl!" My father's voice interrupted my conversation with the mayor's wife. His arm slid around my shoulders in a gesture that once would have filled me with pride, but now felt like restraint. "Sarah's our secret weapon in the courtroom. Juries can't resist her combination of meticulous preparation and natural empathy." The praise, so similar to what he'd offered countless times at similar events, now carried an undertone I couldn't miss, a public reinforcement of my value as a litigator while systematically diminishing my leadership potential behind closed doors. "You're too kind, Dad," I replied, matching his practiced warmth. I learned from the master. His eyes met mine, searching for signs of the resentment he must expect after Kevin's promotion. I maintained a perfect mask of daughterly admiration, wondering if he detected the double meaning in my words. I had indeed learned from the master, not just trial skills and client management, but now the recognition of calculated manipulation and ethical compromise. "Richard, they're ready for the presentation," a committee member interrupted, leading my father toward the stage where the Distinguished Service Award awaited. My mother appeared at my side, resplendent in designer silk, diamond earrings catching the light with each precise movement of her head. "Stand straighter, Sarah. The Carmichael sister is photographing for the society page." I adjusted my posture automatically, years of such corrections creating muscle memory that operated independently of my thoughts. "The turnout is impressive. Of course it is. Your father is being honored after 30 years of building the most respected firm in Arizona. Her pride was genuine, if narrowly focused on external validation rather than the substance beneath it. Though I must say, you could have chosen a more flattering style. That neckline does nothing for your collarbone. I tuned out her continued critique of my appearance, familiar territory that no longer carried the sting it once had. My attention was on Kevin, who stood near the bar engaged in what appeared to be intense conversation with Walter. Their body language suggested disagreement. Walter's brow furrowed as Kevin gestured emphatically. "What is your brother doing talking to Walter instead of the Harrington executives?" my mother asked, following my gaze. "Your father specifically asked him to cultivate that relationship tonight." "Perhaps he's discussing a case," I suggested, though I suspected their conversation centered on tomorrow's partnership meeting. "I should check if everything's all right." Before she could object, I moved across the room, navigating through clusters of Phoenix's legal aristocracy. As I approached, Walter noticed me and adjusted his posture, his expression clearing. "Sarah." Kevin greeted me with forced casualness. Walter was just sharing an interesting perspective on partnership structures. "A purely academic discussion," Walter added smoothly, comparing governance models across different-sized firms. I understood their caution. The ballroom offered too many eyes and ears for genuine conversation about our investigation. Fascinating topic. Perhaps we could continue it tomorrow after the partnership meeting. Kevin nodded, the slight tension in his jaw belying his relaxed demeanor. "Absolutely. I should circulate. Dad mentioned wanting me to connect with the Harrington team." As he moved away, Walter leaned closer. "Your brother seems genuinely concerned about the restructuring implications, but he's hesitant about confronting your father directly." "He needs more time," I murmured. "This is all very new to him." "Time may be a luxury we don't have. I've heard rumors that the Harrington merger documentation is being prepared for signature next week, well before your father's birthday celebration." This acceleration was concerning. Were we losing the window for controlled intervention? "What's driving the rush?" "That's what troubles me," Walter admitted. "Sudden urgency usually indicates external pressure. I'm wondering if there are financial problems at Harrington we don't know about, making this merger time-sensitive." Before we could explore this further, the lights dimmed and attention turned to the stage where the president of the State Bar Association was introducing my father with glowing praise about integrity, service, and dedication to legal ethics. The irony was almost unbearable. My father accepted the Crystal Award with practiced humility, delivering a speech that hit all the expected notes: gratitude to colleagues, commitment to justice, pride in mentoring the next generation of attorneys. His gaze found me in the crowd as he spoke about the importance of family legacy in the firm. Kevin at his right hand, the implied message clear to anyone paying attention. The Williams firm would continue through his son, not his daughter. The audience applauded enthusiastically, unaware of the corruption beneath the polished surface. I joined the ovation mechanically, maintaining the appearance expected of a supportive daughter and firm partner, while internally cataloging each hypocritical statement for future reference. As the formal program concluded and the evening shifted to cocktails and networking, I found myself approached by James Harrington himself, a surprise, as the CEO of Harrington Global rarely attended such functions. "Ms. Williams," he greeted me, his handshake firm and calculating. "Your reputation precedes you. The pharmaceutical class action victory was particularly impressive." "Thank you, Mr. Harrington. I wasn't aware you followed our litigation results so closely." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I make it my business to know the capabilities of firms we might work with. Your father speaks highly of your courtroom skills." "But not my leadership potential," I noted silently. "I understand your company has been exploring a deeper relationship with Williams and Associates." A flicker of surprise crossed his features, before the practiced executive mask returned. Your father mentioned he's been discussing potential collaborations with your brother as the incoming managing partner. Kevin and I have no secrets, I replied, watching his reaction carefully. We're both committed to understanding all aspects of the firm's future direction. Harrington studied me with new interest, reassessing whatever he'd been told about my role, or lack thereof, in the firm's restructuring. I see. Well, perhaps we should schedule a time to talk more specifically about how your litigation expertise might fit into the broader relationship we're developing. I'd welcome that conversation, especially regarding how such a relationship would maintain the ethical standards our firm was built upon. I emphasized the last words slightly, watching his expression. Ethics are certainly a priority for Harrington Global, he replied smoothly, though something flickered in his eyes, awareness, perhaps, that I wasn't as sidelined as my father had suggested. I look forward to exploring this further. If you'll excuse me, I should speak with Judge Thompson before he leaves. As Harrington moved away, I noticed my father watching our interaction from across the room, his expression unreadable, but his attention unmistakable. I maintained a pleasant smile, raising my champagne glass slightly in his direction before turning to engage with a state senator who'd approached me. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of strategic conversations and careful observations. I noted which judges seemed particularly friendly with Harrington executives, which partners appeared to have been briefed on pending changes, which associates were being showcased to potential clients from Harrington's corporate network. By the time my mother signaled it was appropriate for family members to depart, I had compiled a mental map of the alliance my father was building to support his restructuring plans. The valet brought my car, and I was about to leave when Kevin appeared beside me. Need a ride? I asked, noting he'd surrendered his keys to the attendant hours earlier. Please, he replied, sliding into the passenger seat. Once we were clear of the resort entrance, his careful composure dissolved. Walter thinks Dad is accelerating the timeline. The partnership meeting tomorrow isn't just informational. He's going to push for preliminary approval of the restructuring. Based on what evidence? Davis overheard Dad on the phone with Harrington after the award presentation. Something about securing partner buy-in ahead of schedule and documentation ready for signatures by Tuesday. Tuesday, 5 days away, more than a week before the birthday gala we'd assumed was the deadline. Did Walter tell the other senior partners? He's calling them tonight. But Sarah, we don't have enough concrete evidence connecting the trust account issues to the restructuring. If Dad presents this as a straightforward strategic merger, most partners will follow his recommendation. Kevin was right. While we had documented trust account violations, we hadn't yet established the direct link to the Harrington merger that would explain my father's urgency and unethical handling of client funds. We need access to Dad's restructuring documents, I said, thinking aloud. The merger agreement details, the new partnership structure, the financial projections. Which means we can't wait until Sunday dinner to search his home office, Kevin concluded. We need those documents before tomorrow's meeting. I glanced at the dashboard clock, 11:30 p.m. The meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. How do you suggest we get them? Break into the house in the middle of the night? We don't need to break in, Kevin said quietly. I still have a key from when I stayed there last month during my condo renovation. I was momentarily stunned by what he was suggesting. You want to enter our parents' home without permission to search for documents? I want to prevent our father from committing additional ethical violations that could destroy the firm and our careers, Kevin countered. They're at the post-event reception until at least 1 a.m. We'd have time to find what we need. The proposal crossed professional and personal boundaries I'd never imagined breaching. Yet if my father was indeed accelerating the timeline, waiting for proper channels might mean losing our opportunity to intervene before irreversible damage was done. This isn't just about unauthorized entry, I warned. If we take documents, even to copy them, it could be seen as theft. If we access his computer, there could be computer fraud issues. We don't need to take anything, Kevin argued. Just photograph key documents with our phones. And Dad's computer password has been the same for years. Mom's birthday followed by his law school graduation year. I weighed our options as I drove through Phoenix's quiet streets. The ethical attorney in me recoiled at the impropriety. The daughter in me flinched at the violation of family trust. But the professional responsibility to protect clients and the firm from ongoing misconduct ultimately outweighed both concerns. If we do this, I said finally, we document exactly what we examined, when, and why. This is extraordinary circumstances justifying extraordinary measures to prevent ongoing harm, not a fishing expedition. Kevin nodded solemnly. Agreed. Do we tell Walter? I considered the question carefully. Walter had been my mentor and guide through this investigation, but involving him in potentially unauthorized access to my father's home created additional ethical complexity. Not beforehand. If we find something relevant, we can discuss how to properly bring it into our documentation. 20 minutes later, we turned onto the tree-lined street where I'd grown up. The Williams family home, a sprawling Spanish colonial in the historic district, stood dark except for security lighting. My parents' cars were absent, confirming they were still at the reception. Kevin used his key to disarm the security system and let us in. The familiar entry hall felt different at midnight. The family photos lining the staircase seemed to watch accusingly as we moved quietly toward my father's home office at the rear of the house. The office door was closed but unlocked. Kevin hesitated with his hand on the knob. Are we really doing this? We're preventing further harm to clients and the firm, I reminded him, though my own doubts clawed at the edges of my determination. If we're wrong about what Dad's doing, no. One needs to know we were here. The office was exactly as I remembered from childhood visits. Imposing mahogany desk, walls lined with legal texts and awards, the scent of leather and my father's sandalwood cologne. The space where I'd once played law office as a child, dreaming of the day I'd follow in Richard Williams' ethical footsteps, was now the scene of our desperate search for evidence of his corruption. Kevin went directly to the desk, trying the drawers. Locked, he muttered, frustration evident. Check the credenza, I suggested, moving to examine the bookshelf where my father often stored active files disguised among legal references. The search proceeded methodically, our legal training evident in how we documented each step with phone photos showing date and timestamps, careful not to disturb the original organization of materials. Behind a row of bound appellate reports, I discovered a portfolio labeled Transition Documents, Confidential. Kevin, I called softly, removing the portfolio and bringing it to the desk. Inside was a goldmine of information, the complete restructuring plan, including a partnership dissolution agreement that confirmed Walter's worst fears. Senior partners would be forced out through triggered incapacity clauses, their equity severely discounted through valuation formulas that wouldn't withstand legal challenge but would likely be accepted to avoid public litigation. A new entity, Williams. Harrington Legal Group, would emerge with Richard and James Harrington controlling 60%, Kevin holding 10%, and remaining equity distributed among junior partners willing to accept the new arrangement. Most damning was a financial summary showing bridge funding moving between accounts to normalize balance sheets before the merger. The amounts and dates matched the trust account violations we'd already documented. He's using client funds to make the firm's finances look better than they are, Kevin said, the reality sinking in. Borrowing from trust accounts to cover operating shortfalls, so Harrington doesn't see how much we've struggled since the recession. This explains the urgency, I noted, photographing each page methodically. If Harrington discovers the true financial situation, the merger terms would be far less favorable. Dad needs to complete this before anyone looks too closely at the books. Further search revealed a USB drive labeled HG Merger Final in my father's handwriting. Kevin plugged it into his phone adapter, revealing digital copies of the documents. We'd found plus additional communications between my father and Harrington. "We need to copy these," Kevin said, already forwarding files to his secure email. "Wait," I cautioned, noticing a folder labeled Partner Management. Inside were individual assessments of each partner, including detailed personal information that could be used as leverage if they oppose the restructuring: health issues, financial troubles, family situations, all cataloged as potential pressure points. My own file contained a cold analysis. Sarah, significant flight risk due to leadership ambitions. Too independently minded for seamless integration. With HG culture. Potential whistleblower if trust account irregularities detected. Recommendation: assigned to complex litigation team with autonomy, but no financial oversight. Consider severance package if resistance emerges. Kevin's assessment was equally revealing. Kevin, eager for recognition but limited financial acumen. Controllable through status incentives and title. No risk of detecting accounting irregularities due to disinterest in administrative details. Ideal public face for transition while actual control remains with RW and JH. The clinical dismantling of our professional worth and family loyalty left me momentarily speechless. My father had assessed us as assets and liabilities in a business transaction, not as children or even colleagues. He never intended either of us to have real authority, Kevin said quietly, the hurt evident beneath his anger. I was just a puppet, and you were a potential problem to be managed. Before I could respond, headlights swept across the windows, a car turning into the driveway. We froze, then sprang into action, returning documents to their original locations, wiping surfaces we'd touched, ensuring everything appeared undisturbed. The reception must have ended early, Kevin whispered, checking his watch. 12:40 a.m., far earlier than expected. We slipped out through the rear door that connected to the garden, moving quickly but carefully to avoid external security lights. Once safely in my car parked a block away, we finally exhaled. That was too close, Kevin said, his usual bravado entirely absent. But we got what we needed. I nodded, adrenaline still coursing through my system. We need to analyze these documents before the meeting. The connection between the trust account violations and the merger is now clear, but we still need a strategy for tomorrow. What options do we have? Dad's going to present this restructuring as a done deal. Senior partners will object based on the dissolution terms, and without exposing the trust account issues, we can't explain the real urgency. His analysis was accurate. We faced an impossible choice. Remain silent while my father pushed through an unethical deal built on misappropriated client funds, or expose the violations publicly with devastating consequences for the firm and our family. We need a third option, I said, starting the car. Let's meet Walter at the office at 7. We'll bring him and the other senior partners up to speed on what we've found, then develop an intervention strategy that addresses the ethical violations, while potentially salvaging something of the firm. As we drove through the quiet streets, I felt the weight of the documentation secured on our phones. My father had built a respected legal institution on principles he now casually violated. He had raised me to believe in justice while calculating how to control or eliminate me if I became inconvenient. The contradiction between the man who'd taught me legal ethics and the one who systematically undermined them was almost impossible to reconcile. What happens to the firm if this becomes public? Kevin asked, breaking the silence. If Dad's ethical violations are reported to the bar? Best case? Dad resigns, makes restitution for any remaining trust account deficiencies, accepts suspension of his license. The firm rebrands and continues under new leadership. I outlined the scenario clinically, though the personal implications remained devastating. And worst case? Criminal charges for trust account violations. The firm collapses as clients flee and partners scatter to competitor firms. The Williams name becomes synonymous with legal scandal rather than excellence. Kevin absorbed this grim assessment. And us? What happens to our careers? I hadn't allowed myself to fully consider the personal consequences of exposing my father's misconduct. My legal reputation was built within Williams and Associates. My professional identity was inextricably linked to the firm my grandfather had founded. Walking away, or worse, being part of its destruction, meant sacrificing not just my current position but potentially my carefully constructed professional future. We start over, I said simply. Build new reputations based on integrity rather than family name. It won't be easy, but it's better than the alternative. Which is becoming complicit, accepting that ethics are flexible when profits are at stake, betraying everything the practice of law should stand for. We arrived at my downtown condo, both too wired to sleep despite the late hour. I made coffee while Kevin transferred the photos and files to my secure laptop, organizing them into a coherent presentation for tomorrow's meeting with Walter and the senior partners. Dad's had contingency plans for forcing out the senior partners. For over a year, Kevin noted, reviewing timestamps on documents. But the trust account transfers only started escalating 6 months ago. Something changed. I considered this observation. That's when Harrington Global first approached him about the merger. The timeline fits. Harrington wanted a Phoenix presence, but only if the firm showed consistent profitability. Dad needed to demonstrate financial stability he didn't actually have. So he borrowed from client funds temporarily, planning to replace them before anyone noticed, Kevin concluded, probably thinking the merger would solve all the cash flow problems. A classic rationalization, I noted. Temporary ethical lapses justified by the greater good of saving the firm. The problem is, once that line is crossed, it becomes easier to cross it again with larger amounts and longer durations. We worked through the night, analyzing documents, connecting timelines, preparing for all possible scenarios at the partnership meeting. By 6 a.m., we had a comprehensive presentation ready for Walter and the senior partners, including evidence of trust account violations, copies of the restructuring documents, and a proposed intervention strategy that might allow the firm to survive the inevitable fallout. As dawn broke over Phoenix, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold beyond my condo windows, Kevin rubbed his tired eyes. Do you remember when we were kids, how Dad used to tell us that a lawyer's reputation was their most valuable asset? I nodded, the memory bittersweet. He said once it was damaged, no courtroom victory could restore it. I wonder when he forgot his own advice, Kevin said quietly. When the firm's success became more important than the principles it was built on. It was the most insightful observation I'd ever heard from my brother, suggesting a depth of understanding I hadn't previously credited him with. In our shared disillusionment, we had found a connection that years of sibling rivalry had prevented, a foundation of genuine respect that might survive whatever came next. We should get ready, I said, gathering the materials we'd prepared. Walter will be waiting. As we prepared to leave, my phone rang, Walter's number appearing on the screen. I answered with speakerphone enabled so Kevin could hear. Sarah, where are you? Walter's voice carried unusual urgency. At my condo with Kevin. We've been preparing for our meeting. Your father called an emergency executive committee session for 7 a.m., Walter interrupted. Before the full partnership meeting. Just him, Kevin as managing partner, and the administrative partner. They're meeting in the small conference room on 16. The executive committee could make certain decisions without full partnership approval. Not major restructuring, but potentially preliminary steps that would be difficult to reverse. What's on the agenda? I asked, though I suspected the answer. Authorizing engagement of transition counsel for a strategic transaction and approving preliminary term sheets, Walter replied grimly. He's laying the groundwork before anyone can object. Kevin checked his watch. 6:30 a.m. I'm supposed to be there in 30 minutes, but I never received notice. Because he doesn't expect you to ask questions or even read what you're signing, I realized. just to provide the second signature required by partnership rules. Kevin's expression hardened with resolve. Then he's in for a surprise. I'll be there, but not to rubber stamp anything. We're on our way, I told Walter. Stall if you can, but don't tip our hand about what we know. As we rushed to leave, I was struck by the irony of our situation. For years, I had resented Kevin's unearned advantages in our father's eyes, his effortless ascension despite minimal effort. Now, that very favoritism had positioned him perfectly to challenge our father's unethical schemes from within, while my marginalization had freed me to build the case from outside. The morning traffic was already building as we navigated toward downtown Phoenix and the gleaming tower housing Williams & Associates. The firm name stood in illuminated letters against the skyline, a beacon of legal prestige my grandfather had established, my father had expanded, and that now faced its greatest threat not from external competition, but from internal corruption. Whatever happens in there, I told Kevin as we pulled into the parking garage, remember that we're doing this to save what matters, the ethical foundation the firm was built on, not just the Williams name on the letterhead. Kevin nodded, a new seriousness in his expression. For what it's worth, Sarah, you should have been managing partner. Not because you're older or worked harder, but because you never lost sight of what actually matters in the practice of law. The unexpected acknowledgement caught me off guard. After years of competition and resentment, my brother was finally seeing me clearly, just as I was beginning to see depths in him I'd previously dismissed. Let's go save our grandfather's firm, I replied, leading the way to the elevator that would carry us to a confrontation neither of us had ever anticipated, but that both of us now recognized as necessary, not just for the firm or our careers, but for the integrity of the legal profession we had both sworn to uphold. The executive committee meeting was already underway when we reached the 16th floor. Through the glass walls of the small conference room, I could see my father standing at the head of the table, gesturing emphatically, while administrative partner Thomas Morgan nodded along, taking notes. Both men looked up in surprise as Kevin pushed open the door with me close behind. Kevin, you're late, my father said, recovering quickly. And Sarah, this is an executive committee meeting. You weren't invited. As a named partner with equity stake, I have standing to attend any firm meeting, I replied smoothly, taking a seat opposite Morgan. Partnership Bylaws, Section 4.3. My father's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He hadn't expected me to invoke the bylaws he himself had drafted years ago to ensure his access to all firm functions. Fine. We were just reviewing some routine administrative matters before the full partnership meeting. Routine matters like engaging Sullivan and Pierce for transition counsel? I asked, nodding toward the engagement letter visible on the table. Sullivan and Pierce was a firm specializing in law firm mergers and dissolutions, hardly routine counsel. Morgan shifted uncomfortably, glancing between my father and me. Thomas had been with the firm since my grandfather's days, handling administrative functions competently but avoiding any hint of confrontation with the Williams family. He was 3 years from retirement and clearly wished to be anywhere but this increasingly tense meeting. We're exploring various strategic options, my father replied carefully. Standard practice for a firm our size in today's competitive market. Kevin took the seat beside me, his expression uncharacteristically serious. What specific options exactly? Because the documents here reference a pre-negotiated transaction structure I haven't been briefed on. My father's surprise at Kevin's question was evident. He had expected his son to simply sign whatever was placed before him, as he had done with countless motions and briefs throughout his mediocre legal career. The emergence of a questioning engaged Kevin clearly hadn't been part of his plan. The specifics are still being finalized, my father hedged. I didn't want to burden you with preliminary details that might change. As managing partner, I should be informed of all significant firm developments, Kevin pressed, using the very title my father had bestowed upon him, especially ones requiring outside counsel at $500 per hour. I nearly smiled at the irony. My father had elevated Kevin precisely because he assumed his son wouldn't ask difficult questions or examine documents closely. Now that same promotion gave Kevin standing to challenge him directly. Morgan cleared his throat nervously. Perhaps we should postpone this discussion until after the full partnership meeting. The other partners will be arriving soon. No, my father said sharply. We need these authorizations now to proceed with the agenda I've prepared. He slid documents across the table toward Kevin. These simply authorize preliminary discussions. Nothing binding. Kevin made no move to take the papers. What preliminary discussions? With whom? My father's patience was visibly thinning. Kevin, sign the authorizations. We can discuss details later. I'm not signing anything without understanding what it authorizes, Kevin replied firmly. That's basic legal practice, isn't it, Dad? Never sign what you haven't read and understood. The echo of our father's oft-repeated advice hung in the air between them. For a moment, genuine uncertainty flickered across my father's face as he realized his carefully constructed plan was encountering unexpected resistance from the very person he'd positioned as his compliant successor. This is about a potential strategic alignment with Harrington Global's legal department, he finally admitted. A merger that would significantly expand our corporate practice and secure our firm's future. A merger that would dissolve the existing partnership and create a new entity where you and James Harrington control 70% of equity, I added, watching Morgan's eyes widen in surprise. While using the incapacity provisions to force out senior partners like Walter Chen at deeply discounted valuations. My father's expression hardened. You've been going through confidential firm documents. I've been fulfilling my fiduciary duty to understand significant transactions affecting the partnership, I countered. Something you've deliberately hidden from most partners. Morgan looked increasingly alarmed. Richard, is this true? Are you planning to invoke the incapacity provisions against Walter? He just won the Sullivan case last month. Walter is nearly 70, my father replied dismissively. His performance has been declining for years. This transition is in the best interest of the firm's future. And the trust account irregularities? Kevin asked quietly. Are those also in the firm's best interest? The words landed like a physical blow. My father went completely still, his practiced courtroom composure momentarily shattered. Morgan gasped audibly, his legal training immediately recognizing the severity of what Kevin had just suggested. Trust account irregularities? Morgan repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. What trust account irregularities? My father recovered quickly. There are no irregularities. Just normal administrative timing issues with settlement distributions. Kevin is misinterpreting routine fund management. I don't think so, Kevin replied, pulling out his phone and bringing up the photos we'd taken of the financial documents. These show systematic temporary transfers from client trust accounts to operating accounts, and then to Williams Legacy Holdings, totaling over $4 million across 7 different client matters in the past 6 months alone. Morgan took the phone with trembling hands, scanning the evidence with mounting horror. As administrative partner, he was technically responsible for financial oversight, though my father had gradually centralized that control in recent years. Richard, these are client funds. They can't be used this way, even temporarily. The funds were all replaced before client disbursements, my father insisted, though his confident tone had faltered. No client was harmed. That's not the standard, and you know it, I said quietly. Misappropriation of client funds is an ethical violation regardless of intent, or whether the funds are eventually replaced. Kevin retrieved his phone from Morgan's, shaking hands. The Westfield settlement shows $2.1 million transferred to operating accounts for 11 days before being returned to the trust account. That's not a timing issue. That's conversion of client funds. My father's face flushed with anger. This is absurd. My own children spying on firm operations, making wild accusations. Not accusations, I interrupted, producing my own phone with the incriminating emails between my father and Harrington. Documented evidence showing you knowingly misused client funds to improve the firm's financial appearance ahead of the Harrington merger. Morgan abruptly stood, his face ashen. I need to remove myself from this discussion immediately and consult independent counsel. As administrative partner, I have mandatory reporting obligations to the state bar for ethical violations of this magnitude. Sit down, Thomas, my father commanded. There's a reasonable explanation for all of this. I've seen enough to trigger my ethical duty to report, Morgan replied, gathering his papers with shaking hands. I'm 3 years from retirement. Richard, I won't risk my license or face potential criminal charges for anyone, not even you. As Morgan hurried from the room, my father turned his full fury toward Kevin and me. Do you have any idea what you've done? The firm your grandfather built, that I expanded into one of the most respected in the Southwest. You're willing to destroy it over some temporary financial maneuvers? You destroyed it, Kevin replied with unexpected steadiness. When you decided client funds were available resources. When you plotted to force out partners who had given decades to building this firm. When you used me as a figurehead to distract from financial fraud. The naked hurt in Kevin's voice momentarily penetrated my father's anger. Richard Williams had always prided himself on being a masterful judge of character, yet he had completely misjudged his own son's capacity for principle when directly confronted with ethical violations. You don't understand the pressures of running a firm this size, my father said, his tone shifting to one I recognized from countless courtroom observations, the reasonable voice he used when trying to explain away damaging evidence. The recession nearly bankrupted us. I did what was necessary to keep everyone employed, to maintain our position in the market. By misappropriating client funds, I challenged. By systematically violating the most fundamental ethical obligation of our profession? By making difficult decisions neither of you has ever had to face, he snapped. Do you think your grandfather never bent rules to keep this firm afloat during hard times? Idealism is a luxury for those who don't bear ultimate responsibility. The suggestion that my grandfather, whose ethical reputation was legendary in Arizona legal circles, would have condoned trust account violations was the final betrayal. Not content with corrupting his own legacy, my father was now attempting to tarnish his father's as well. Don't bring grandfather into this, I said, my voice low but intense. He would be ashamed of what you've done to his firm. Something flickered in my father's eyes. Perhaps the first genuine flash of shame I'd seen since this confrontation began. But it vanished quickly, replaced by cold calculation. This discussion is over, he declared, gathering the documents Kevin had refused to sign. The partnership meeting starts in 20 minutes. I suggest you both consider very carefully the consequences of making these accusations in a public forum. Not just for me, but for yourselves and every attorney associated with this firm. After he strode out, Kevin and I sat in stunned silence. For a moment, the reality of what had just transpired sinking in. Morgan's exit to consult independent counsel meant the ethical violations would likely be reported regardless of what happened next. The controlled intervention we had hoped for was rapidly becoming a full-blown crisis. He didn't even deny it, Kevin said finally. He just justified it as necessary for the firm's survival. Classic rationalization, I replied. The ends justify the means. What he fails to recognize is that once that ethical line is crossed, there's no firm worth saving, just a legal entity that happens to bear our family name. Walter appeared in the doorway, his expression grave. Morgan just canceled the partnership meeting and announced he's taking emergency personal leave. The entire 16th floor is buzzing with speculation. What happened? I quickly summarized our confrontation, including Morgan's reaction to the trust account evidence and my father's justifications. Walter nodded grimly as the scenario unfolded. "This changes our approach," he said once I'd finished. "With Morgan likely to report to the Bar Association, we need to focus on damage control rather than controlled intervention." "What options do we have?" Kevin asked. "Limited ones," Walter admitted. "The senior partners should be informed immediately, before they hear distorted versions from others. We need to prepare for client concerns once this becomes public, as it inevitably will, and we need to consider the possibility of removing your father from management before he can do further damage." The partnership agreement had provisions for emergency removal of managing partners in extraordinary circumstances, but such a move required 2/3 majority vote. Difficult to achieve given my father's long-standing relationships with many partners. "He'll fight it," I warned. "Dad won't go quietly, even with evidence of ethical violations." "No, he won't," Walter agreed, "which is why we need to move quickly. The longer this remains unaddressed, the more risk to the firm and every partner's professional reputation." We decided to convene an emergency meeting of senior partners in Walter's office, away from my father's usual territory on the executive floor. As the elevator descended to Walter's floor, I noticed Kevin staring at his reflection in the polished doors, his expression troubled. "Having second thoughts?" I asked quietly. He shook his head slowly. "Just realizing how completely Dad played me. Managing partner," he scoffed. "I was never anything but a distraction while he dismantled everything this firm stands for." "He played us both," I reminded him. "Me by sidelining me, you by elevating you. The difference is, you knew your worth regardless," Kevin replied with unexpected insight. "I've been trying to earn his approval my entire life, never measuring up to his expectations or your achievements. This fake promotion was the first time I felt I'd finally arrived. Pretty pathetic, right?" The vulnerability in his admission caught me off guard. Throughout our childhood and professional lives, I'd seen only Kevin's entitled confidence, his assumption that charm could substitute for substance. I'd never recognized the insecurity beneath, the constant striving for a father's approval that was always conditional, always just out of reach. "Not pathetic," I said gently. "Human. We both wanted his respect, just in different ways." The elevator doors opened, preventing further conversation as we made our way to Walter's office. Several senior partners had already arrived, their expressions varying from confusion to concern. Walter had clearly told them only that an urgent situation required immediate attention. Over the next hour, we presented the evidence we'd gathered: trust account transfers, merger documents, partnership dissolution plans, to the stunned senior partners. Decades-long loyalties to Richard Williams visibly crumbled as the full scope of ethical violations and planned partner purge became clear. "This isn't just an internal matter," Davis, our senior tax partner, noted grimly. "Trust account violations of this magnitude trigger mandatory reporting requirements. We could all face disciplinary action if we don't address this immediately." "Morgan's already consulting independent counsel," Walter confirmed. "We should assume formal bar complaints will be filed within days, if not hours." "What about clients?" Wong, head of our corporate department, asked. "The Westfield family, others whose settlement funds were misappropriated, they'll have grounds for malpractice claims against the entire firm." The gravity of the situation settled heavily on the room. This wasn't just about my father's ethical lapses or even the future of the firm. Every attorney in the partnership faced potential professional consequences from actions many hadn't known about until this moment. "We need to get ahead of this," I said, mental gears shifting from investigation to crisis management. Voluntary disclosure to affected clients, immediate audit of all trust accounts, full cooperation with bar investigators. "And Richard?" Walter asked the question everyone was thinking but hesitant to articulate. "What do we do about the founding partner?" The room fell silent. Despite the damning evidence, these attorneys had worked alongside my father for years, some for decades. They had tried cases with him, celebrated victories, weathered defeats. Professional relationships had evolved into friendships, family connections, complex webs of loyalty now strained to breaking point. "He needs to resign," Kevin said firmly, breaking the uncomfortable silence. "Voluntarily and immediately. It's the only way to begin salvaging the firm's reputation and potentially mitigate disciplinary consequences for other partners." "He won't go willingly," Martin, our oldest partner after Walter, predicted. "Richard has always identified himself completely with this firm. Leaving would be tantamount to admitting he's destroyed his father's legacy." "We invoke Article 12 of the Partnership Agreement," I suggested. "Emergency removal for cause. With the evidence we've presented, we should have the necessary votes." Before anyone could respond, the office door opened and my father walked in, his expression coldly furious as he surveyed the assembled partners. "An emergency meeting without notifying the managing partner. Interesting interpretation of the partnership agreement." Walter stood, his slight frame somehow imposing in its dignity. "Richard, given the circumstances, we felt it appropriate to discuss the situation without your presence initially." The situation being my children's misguided crusade based on documents they obtained improperly, my father countered smoothly. Documents that, viewed in context by experienced legal minds rather than overeager associates, reflect complex but entirely legitimate financial management during challenging economic times. The practiced courtroom cadence, the subtle undermining of Kevin's and my credibility, the redefinition of ethical violations as sophisticated management, it was a masterful performance that had swayed countless juries. I could see several partners wavering, wanting to believe there was an innocent explanation for what they'd just heard. "The Arizona rules of professional conduct don't allow for complex but legitimate misappropriation of client funds," I stated firmly. "Rule 115 is unambiguous. Client funds must remain in trust accounts until properly dispersed to clients or authorized third parties. Temporary administrative transfers that were fully rectified before any client disbursement do not constitute misappropriation under controlling case law," my father replied, seamlessly shifting to legal argument. "Martin, you remember the Clayton disciplinary matter from 2014? The distinction between technical violations and actual client harm was decisive." Martin nodded uncertainly, my father's reference to an obscure precedent creating just enough doubt to weaken his conviction. This was my father's greatest skill as a litigator, finding the precise pressure point that would undermine an opponent's certainty. Kevin, however, wasn't having it. "Stop treating this like a closing argument," he said sharply. "We're not a jury you can manipulate with selective precedent and redefined terms. We've seen the documents. We've seen the emails explicitly acknowledging these transfers were improper and needed to be concealed from regulatory review." My father's expression hardened. "You've both made serious allegations that threaten this firm's existence based on documents obtained without authorization and emails taken out of context. Before this goes any further, I suggest everyone consider the potential liability for defamation and tortious interference if these accusations prove unfounded." The thinly veiled threat had its intended effect. Several partners shifted uncomfortably, their resolve visibly weakening under the implication of personal liability. My father had spent decades building relationships with these attorneys, understanding their individual fears and pressure points. He knew exactly which buttons to push to create doubt and division. "This isn't going away, Richard," Walter said quietly. "Thomas Morgan is likely at the Bar Association right now, fulfilling his ethical duty to report. The documents exist. The trust account transfers happened. Threatening your partners won't change those facts." Something in Walter's calm certainty seemed to reach my father in a way our previous confrontations hadn't. For a brief moment, the confident litigator facade cracked, revealing the cornered man beneath. "You have no idea what I've sacrificed for this firm," he said, his voice lower, but intense. "The financial pressures after the recession, the competitive threats, the technological disruption, I kept us afloat when firms twice our size were dissolving. Everything I did was to preserve what my father built. By betraying the principles he built it on, I replied, matching his intensity. Grandfather created this firm on a foundation of absolute ethical integrity. That was the legacy you were entrusted with. Not just a profitable business, but a standard of professional conduct. My father's gaze locked with mine, decades of complicated dynamics passing between us in that moment. The mentor who had shaped my legal thinking, the father who had encouraged my ambitions while simultaneously limiting them, the attorney who had taught me ethical boundaries he himself had crossed. "You've always been so certain of your moral high ground, Sarah," he said finally. "So quick to judge without having borne the weight of ultimate responsibility. Perhaps that's my failure as a teacher." "Your failure wasn't as a teacher," I responded, feeling the weight of accumulated disappointment. "It was as a practitioner, of what you taught." The standoff might have continued, but we were interrupted by Davis's assistant appearing at the door, her expression anxious. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's an urgent matter requiring immediate attention. James Harrington is in reception with 2 attorneys from Sullivan and Pierce. They're demanding to speak with Mr. Williams about allegations of financial misrepresentation." The news rippled through the room like an electric current. Harrington's presence with outside counsel suggested the merger partner had somehow learned of the trust account issues and potential financial instability they represented. How could Harrington know already? Kevin wondered aloud. Morgan, Walter realized. He must have contacted Harrington directly after leaving the executive committee meeting, either as a professional courtesy or to protect himself from potential liability. My father's composed expression faltered for the first time, genuine alarm breaking through his careful control. James Harrington was notoriously unforgiving of what he considered betrayal or dishonesty. If he believed my father had misrepresented the firm's financial stability while negotiating merger terms, the consequences would extend beyond professional ethics to potential civil fraud. "Tell them I'll be right there," my father instructed the assistant, visibly gathering himself. "Prepare conference room A and have Melissa pull the Harrington merger files." After the assistant departed, he turned back to the assembled partners. "This discussion will have to continue later. I need to address Harrington's concerns immediately." "We'll all address Harrington's concerns," Walter stated firmly. "As senior partners potentially affected by both the merger and the underlying ethical issues, we have every right to participate in that conversation." My father clearly wanted to object, but the unified front presented by the partners left him little choice. "Fine, but let me handle the initial explanations. This requires careful management to preserve the merger opportunity." As we prepared to confront Harrington and his attorneys, Kevin moved to my side. "He still thinks he can talk his way out of this," he murmured, watching our father straighten his tie and adjust his cuffs. "Ritual preparations for courtroom battle. He spent 40 years convincing people to believe his version of reality," I replied quietly. "Old habits die hard." "But they do die," Kevin noted, with unexpected wisdom. "Eventually, the facts catch up to even the most persuasive narrative." We moved as a group toward conference room A, the senior partners of Williams and Associates presenting a united front, despite the internal fractures that had been exposed that morning. Whatever personal feelings existed toward my father, anger, betrayal, lingering loyalty, professional survival now demanded collective action. James Harrington stood as we entered, his commanding physical presence matched by an aura of barely contained fury. Beside him, 2 attorneys from Sullivan and Pierce maintained professionally neutral expressions, though the documents spread before them suggested they had been reviewing the very merger terms now in question. "Richard," Harrington greeted my father coldly. "I received some disturbing information this morning regarding financial irregularities at Williams and Associates. Information that, if accurate, constitutes material misrepresentation during our merger discussions." My father stepped forward, hand extended as though this were a routine business meeting. James, I'm sure whatever you've heard has been greatly exaggerated or taken out of context. Why don't we discuss this privately? Harrington ignored the outstretched hand. Thomas Morgan provided quite specific documentation, Richard. Trust account transfers, temporary fund allocations, artificially inflated profit statements. Not the sort of thing that improves with context. The senior Sullivan and Pierce attorney, a woman whose reputation for handling law firm dissolutions was nationally recognized, spoke next. Mr. Williams, our preliminary review suggests potential violations of both ethical rules and securities regulations in how financial information was presented to Harrington Global. Given these concerns, our client is exercising the termination provisions in the preliminary agreement effective immediately. My father's carefully cultivated composure finally cracked completely. You can't terminate based on unverified allegations from a disgruntled administrative partner. The merger terms are clear. The merger terms include standard representations regarding financial stability and regulatory compliance, the attorney interrupted smoothly. Representations that appear to have been materially false when made. Harrington's expression was granite. I built my company on two principles, Richard: aggressive growth and absolute internal integrity. I can tolerate the former without the latter, but never the reverse. The irony wasn't lost on me. James Harrington, whose company had settled multiple regulatory investigations without admission of wrongdoing, positioning himself as an ethical purist. But business ethics and legal ethics operated on different planes, and my father had violated the most fundamental tenet of attorney trust. We can resolve any misunderstandings, my father insisted, desperation edging into his normally controlled voice. The partnership is prepared to make concessions on the equity distribution, accelerate the transition timeline. This isn't a negotiation, Harrington cut him off. It's a termination. My attorneys will handle the formal notifications. He turned to address the other partners. For what it's worth, I respected what this firm represented in the legal community. Its reputation for integrity was precisely why we pursued this merger. The pointed use of past tense hung in the air as Harrington and his attorneys gathered their materials and departed, leaving the partners of Williams and Associates facing the wreckage of both the merger opportunity and, potentially, the firm itself. In the silence that followed, all eyes turned to my father, the commanding presence who had directed the firm's path for decades, now standing diminished by his own actions. For the first time in my life, Richard Williams looked genuinely lost. The carefully constructed identity of successful attorney, firm leader, and family patriarch crumbling visibly. The partnership meeting will convene in 30 minutes, Walter announced, taking control of the situation. All equity partners are required to attend. We need to make immediate decisions regarding leadership transition, client notification, and regulatory compliance. As the partners filed out to prepare, I remained behind, finding myself unexpectedly alone with my father, the man who had shaped my legal mind, whose approval I had sought my entire career, whose ethical teachings I had internalized even as he himself abandoned them. Was it worth it? I asked softly. Trading everything you built, everything you taught us to value, for a merger that's now collapsed anyway? My father didn't meet my eyes, staring instead at the conference table where moments before his carefully constructed future had disintegrated. You think you understand what happened here, but you don't. The pressures of maintaining a mid-sized firm in today's legal market. Stop, I interrupted. No more justifications, no more rationalizations. Just once, acknowledge what you actually did. For a moment, I thought he would continue the defense, the deflection, the reframing of ethical violations as necessary business decisions. But something had broken in Richard Williams with Harrington's departure. Perhaps the final self-deception that his actions had at least served a greater purpose in securing the firm's future. I lost sight of the line, he admitted, his voice barely audible. One small compromise led to another, each one easier to justify than the last. By the time I realized how far I'd gone, there seemed no way back except forward through the merger. It wasn't a full acknowledgement, but it was perhaps as close to genuine contrition as my father was capable of in that moment. The partner meeting would address the professional consequences of his actions, but the personal fallout, for our family, for the legacy of 3 generations of Williams attorneys, was only beginning to unfold. "The partner meeting starts soon," I said, turning to leave. "You should prepare a statement. The firm deserves that much at least." As I walked toward the door, his voice stopped me. "Sarah." I turned back to find him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite define. Regret, perhaps, or reluctant. Pride. "You were always the better lawyer. The partnership should have been yours." The acknowledgement I had sought for years came too late and under the worst possible circumstances. It offered no satisfaction, no vindication, only a hollow confirmation of what should have been obvious all along. "It was never about the title, Dad," I replied quietly. "It was about upholding what the firm was supposed to stand for, what you taught me it stood for." I left him there, a solitary figure in the conference room where countless legal strategies had been formulated, client victories planned, firm futures mapped. Now those same walls would witness the dismantling of Richard Williams's career and the challenging rebirth of the firm that bore his name, if it survived at all. The emergency partnership meeting lasted for 6 grueling hours. Decades of professional relationships, personal loyalties, and firm history collided with the stark reality of ethical violations that could not be ignored. My father, to his credit, abandoned further attempts at justification. He presented a concise statement acknowledging the trust account transfers while emphasizing that all client funds had ultimately been restored before disbursement. He then offered his immediate resignation as managing partner and suggested an interim leadership committee to guide the firm through the impending crisis. The discussion that followed was raw and painful. Some partners defended my father's overall legacy while condemning the specific violations. Others expressed anger at being placed at professional risk by actions taken without their knowledge. Through it all, Walter maintained a steady, principled focus on the necessary steps forward rather than recriminations about the past. By late afternoon, several critical decisions had been reached. My father would resign from the partnership entirely, effective immediately. A 3-person executive committee consisting of Walter, Davis, and Wong would assume temporary leadership. All clients affected by trust account transfers would be notified personally, with full disclosure and offers to waive outstanding fees. An independent audit of all financial accounts would begin immediately, with results reported directly to the State Bar's Ethics Committee. As the shell-shocked partners dispersed, I found myself in Walter's office with Kevin, attempting to process the seismic shift in our professional and personal landscapes. The firm that had been our legacy, our future, our very identity, was now fighting for survival. The father who had shaped our legal careers was facing potential disbarment and possibly criminal charges. "What happens tomorrow?" Kevin asked, the bravado completely stripped from his voice. "How do we even begin to address this with staff, with clients?" Walter sighed, the weight of leadership already visible in his posture. "We start with absolute transparency. The firm-wide meeting first thing in the morning will outline exactly what happened and the steps we're taking to address it. Then we begin the client notifications, starting with those directly affected by the trust account issues." "And Dad?" I asked quietly. "The partnership has agreed to cover the cost of ethics counsel," Walter replied. "Beyond that, Richard will need to navigate the disciplinary process on his own. Given the documentation and his admission in the partnership meeting, suspension of his license is the best-case scenario." The clinical discussion of my father's professional demise felt surreal. despite the anger and betrayal, despite the clear, ethical violations. Some part of me still struggled to reconcile the principled attorney who had mentored me with the man who had systematically undermined those same principles. "You both should go home," Walter advised, noting our exhaustion. "Tomorrow will require all our strength and focus." Kevin and I walked silently to the parking garage, both too emotionally drained for further discussion. As we reached our cars, he hesitated. "I don't think I can face Mom alone tonight. She's been calling nonstop since the partner meeting began." I checked my phone to find 17 missed calls from Elizabeth Williams. News traveled quickly in legal circles. She undoubtedly knew something significant had occurred, even if she didn't yet understand the full magnitude. "We should tell her together," I agreed. "This affects her future as much as anyone's." The drive to my parents' home felt like passage into foreign territory. The familiar streets of the historic district, the stately colonial where I'd grown up preparing for a legal career in my father's image, all seemed altered by the events of the day, as if the physical landscape had been reshaped by the collapse of what I thought I knew about my family and our firm. My mother opened the door before we could ring the bell, her usually perfect appearance showing signs of distress, hair slightly disheveled, makeup fading after hours of worry. "Where have you been? What's happening? Your father isn't answering his phone, and Eliza Patterson called saying Richard had resigned from the firm. That can't possibly be right." Kevin and I exchanged glances, silently negotiating who would deliver the news that would shatter my mother's carefully constructed world. To my surprise, Kevin stepped forward, gently guiding her into the living room. "Mom, we need to talk about some serious issues at the firm," he began, his voice steadier than I'd expected. "Dad has resigned, and there are some regulatory matters that will become public soon." "Regulatory matters," she repeated, confusion evident. "What does that mean? Some sort of technical violation? That can be handled with a fine or whatever is needed. There's no reason to resign over something administrative." "It's more serious than that," I said, taking a seat opposite her. "There were improper transfers of client funds from trust accounts. Dad has admitted to using settlement money temporarily for firm expenses." My mother stared at me blankly. "I don't understand what that means." "It means he took money that belonged to clients and used it for other purposes," Kevin explained gently. "It's one of the most serious ethical violations an attorney can commit." "That's absurd," she protested immediately. "Your father is scrupulous about ethical matters. He lectures at the law school on professional responsibility." "There must be some mistake." "There's no mistake, Mom," I said quietly. "The documentation is clear, and Dad has acknowledged the transfers. They happened over several months, increasing in frequency and amount as the firm faced financial pressure." My mother's carefully maintained composure began to crumble as the implications penetrated. "What does this mean? For the firm? For your father's license? For us?" We outlined the likely consequences as compassionately as possible. The bar disciplinary process, potential suspension or disbarment, possible financial penalties, the uncertain future of the firm, the inevitable social fallout as the scandal became public knowledge. "Where is he now?" she asked finally, her voice small. "We don't know," Kevin admitted. "He left the office after the partnership meeting. He's not answering his phone." My mother's hands trembled slightly as she smoothed her skirt, a nervous gesture I'd rarely seen from this woman who prided herself on perfect self-control. 40 years, she said softly. 40 years building a reputation, a position in this community. Gone in a single day. Her focus on reputation rather than the ethical breach itself was quintessentially Elizabeth Williams. Throughout my childhood, appearance had always mattered more than substance in her worldview. The right schools, the right social connections, the right neighborhood, all carefully cultivated to maintain the image of the perfect legal family. The reputation was already compromised when Dad started misappropriating client funds, I pointed out, perhaps more harshly than intended. Today just brought it to light. She flinched at my words. You don't understand the pressures he faced, the expectations of maintaining our position, supporting the lifestyle we all benefited from. Did you know? Kevin asked directly. About the financial issues at the firm? About what he was doing? My mother's gaze dropped to her hands. Not specifically. I knew there were cash flow concerns after the recession. Richard was working longer hours, more stressed than I'd ever seen him. He mentioned several times that maintaining appearances was crucial while the firm stabilized. The evasive answer revealed more than she likely intended. Elizabeth Williams might not have known the specific mechanism of my father's ethical violations, but she had understood that corners were being cut, that the family's lifestyle exceeded the firm's legitimate capacity to support it. The birthday gala will need to be canceled, she said suddenly, the non sequitur revealing how her mind was jumping between practical implications. And the club membership will likely have to go. People will talk, of course, the Hendersons. Daughter just made partner at Morris & Foster. Perhaps I should reach out about positions for both of you there? The suggestion that we simply transfer to another prestigious firm, as if the ethical crisis were merely a career inconvenience, demonstrated how fundamentally my mother misunderstood the situation. Our professional reputations were now inextricably linked to a scandal that would be discussed in legal circles for years to come. The Williams name, once a source of pride and access, had become a potential liability. We need to focus on the immediate issues first, I redirected gently. The firm will make public statements tomorrow. You should prepare for media interest, and perhaps consider staying with friends for a few days. The conversation continued in this vein. Practical considerations, immediate next steps, contingency plans for various scenarios. Throughout, my mother gradually shifted from denial to a kind of numb acceptance, though her concerns remained primarily focused on social and financial implications rather than the ethical breach at the core of the crisis. As the evening wore on, my phone buzzed with a text from Walter. Richard came back to the office. We've talked. He's going home now. I showed the message to Kevin and my mother. Dad's on his way here, I explained. Kevin and I should go. You two need space to discuss what happens next. My mother looked suddenly vulnerable, a woman facing the collapse of her carefully constructed life. Stay, please. I don't know what to say to him, how to handle this. But I shook my head, already gathering my purse. This is between you and Dad now. Kevin and I have our own reckonings to face with him, but not tonight. Tonight is for you two, to begin figuring out your path forward. In the driveway, Kevin hesitated before getting into his car. What do we do now, Sarah? About our careers, our futures? I don't know, I admitted. The firm might survive this with Walter's leadership, but it will be forever changed. And our association with it comes with complications now. Do we stay and help rebuild, or start fresh somewhere else? He wondered. That's a decision for tomorrow, I replied, exhaustion finally overtaking me. Tonight, we just process what happened. 3 weeks later, I stood in the new offices of Chen Williams and Associates, watching as the modest sign was installed in the reception area. The Williams in the firm name now referred to Kevin and me, not our father. After Richard Williams' formal resignation and the commencement of bar disciplinary proceedings, the partnership had voted to dissolve the original firm and reconstitute with a new name and leadership structure. Walter Chen had been unanimously elected managing partner, with Kevin and I serving as department heads for litigation and client relations respectively. We had moved to smaller offices, downsized staff, and focused on rebuilding client relationships based on transparent communication and renewed ethical commitment. The transition had been painful. Nearly 20% of clients had departed immediately following the disclosure of trust account violations. Several partners had resigned to join competitor firms rather than weather the reputational damage. My father had accepted a 2-year suspension of his license in a negotiated settlement with the bar, avoiding potential disbarment but effectively ending his legal career at age 70. My mother had retreated from her extensive social obligations, canceling the birthday gala and withdrawing from charity boards where she had once held leadership positions. The family home was now on the market, a necessary step to fund the substantial restitution payments and legal fees resulting from the disciplinary process. "What do you think?" Kevin asked, joining me in surveying the new sign. "Strange to see. Our name's up there without Dad's." "It's appropriate," I replied. "This is a new firm built on what the original should have been, not what it became." Walter emerged from his office, leaning less heavily on his cane than he had in recent months. The challenge of rebuilding seemed to have energized rather than depleted him. "The Carter deposition is set for Thursday," he informed us. "Their general counsel specifically requested that you handle it, Sarah. A good sign they're regaining confidence in us." Small victories like this had become our focus. Each retained client, each new matter, each positive interaction, a step toward rehabilitation of the firm's reputation. The process would take years, perhaps the remainder of our careers. But the foundation was solid now. No ethical shortcuts, no compromise principles, no matter the financial pressures. "Have you spoken with Dad recently?" Walter asked Kevin, his tone carefully neutral. Kevin nodded. "Yesterday. He's considering teaching options once his suspension is completed. Phoenix Community College has a paralegal program that might be interested in his litigation experience." The humbling career shift, from named partner at a prestigious firm to community college instructor, was yet another consequence of choices made and lines crossed. Yet, there was a certain symmetry to it, a return to the educational role my father had always excelled at when sharing his knowledge with younger attorneys. "And your mother?" Walter inquired, including me in the question. "Adjusting," I replied. Simply. My relationship with Elizabeth Williams had been strained even before the scandal. The aftermath had not improved it. Her continued focus on the unfairness of social consequences rather than the legitimacy of professional ones created a gulf between us that seemed unbridgeable for now. A young associate approached with questions about a pending motion, drawing Walter away and leaving Kevin and me alone with our thoughts and the new firm sign that represented both an ending and a beginning. "Do you think Grandfather would be proud of what we've done?" Kevin asked unexpectedly. "Salvaging something from the wreckage?" I considered the question carefully. John Williams had built his practice on unwavering ethical standards at a time when such principles often came at significant financial cost. His grandson had compromised those standards in pursuit of expansion and status. His great-grandchildren had exposed those compromises and attempted to restore the original foundation. "I think he would recognize what we're trying to do," I said finally. "Rebuild based on what matters most in this profession: trust, integrity, service to clients rather than self." Kevin nodded thoughtfully. "I never really understood that before. I saw the law as a path to status, to Dad's approval. I never fully grasped what it meant to be entrusted with other people's problems, their funds, their futures." His admission reflected a profound transformation. The entitled, somewhat shallow brother who had accepted unearned promotion was evolving into a thoughtful attorney who understood the weight of professional responsibility. Perhaps this crisis, for all its pain, had forged him into the lawyer he might never otherwise have become. "We should get back to work," I suggested, turning from the sign toward the modest suite of offices that now housed our professional aspirations. "The Westbrook brief is due tomorrow, and I promised Martinez we'd review his draft settlement agreement by end of day." As we walked through the reception area, a potential new client waited nervously, case files clutched in hand. The work continued. Less prestigious perhaps than before, more challenging given our damaged reputation, but ultimately more meaningful because we now understood exactly what we were fighting to rebuild. Not just a law firm that happened to bear our family name, but the principles that name had once stood for, and with dedication and integrity, might stand for again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.